Let's look at some of the top reasons for challenging behaviors in children with autism. Challenging behaviors are behaviors that can be considered socially unacceptable and can often be self-defeating for the child. The behavior will place both the child and his carer or parent in a difficult situation where it's not always easy for them to know how to respond. Resisting is an example where a child does not want to, for instance, leave the house and has a tantrum, or not cooperating, refusing requests. For example, you ask your child to go and brush his teeth and he ignores you. Talking excessively, arguing and being confrontational, engaging in behaviors that are inappropriate or destructive, for example, breaking things, interrupting others, speaking in ways that are offensive or rude, yelling, crying, aggression, such as biting, slapping, kicking, or hitting, and then self-harm, where the child might hurt themselves by hitting or slapping themselves, and this could often include head banging, and these are all dangerous forms of aggression or challenging behaviors. Challenging behaviors are a message from the person who is engaging in that behavior to the people around him. They serve a purpose for the child. For example, a child who is anxious about his first day of school might refuse to go. So in his refusal, he is saying to you through his behavior that he feels afraid and that he does not want to go. An autistic child may not be able to express himself, to say what is troubling him. He might not have the words. So he speaks by acting out, often in ways that are socially inappropriate or harmful to the child and his family. Parents and carers need to work out the reasons for the behavior and see what are the patterns and provide their child with tools that he can use to express himself in appropriate ways. In other words, we replace that challenging behavior with a form of communication or a positive action or behavior so that the challenging behavior then goes away, because the child has found a way to express himself or to engage in a behavior that gets him what he wants. And we can only get to this point when we actually understand the reason behind the behavior. We, however, need to remember that behavior is not a science. Well, in my book, I don't think it's a science. As human beings, we react in different ways, and even if someone were to help us as neurotypicals and give us tools to be able to cope with a problem, that does not necessarily mean that we will use those tools, that we will use what we have learned. And so in the same way, children with autism can be given tools, can be taught to cope, but this doesn't mean that in a predicament, when faced with a difficult situation, that they will remember to use what they know or apply the tools that they have been given. Here are some of the top reasons for challenging behaviors: hunger, thirst, tiredness, pain or discomfort caused by a medical condition, for example, constipation or diarrhea, a food sensitivity or an allergy, a problem in the mouth such as an abscess. Anxiety. A child who is afraid of dogs might refuse to walk down the street because he anticipates being barked at by the dogs who live on that road. Anger, frustration, fear, defiance, or sorrow. These emotions relate to a specific problem occurring in the child's environment, which may be ongoing or an isolated incident. For example, a child might be sad because his sibling has left home, but not fully understand or be able to explain his own sorrow to others. So that is not an isolated incident, that is an ongoing change in the environment. Then lack of routine and structure. Autistic children enjoy sameness and predictability, so they need to live in a home where there is a fixed routine, and they should know what that routine is. If a child's routine changes and he is not informed in advance of the change, this might provoke a negative response. For example, my daughter eats at 12 p.m. every day. And one time we were on holiday in the reserve and we continued to sightsee until 1 o'clock. This provoked a meltdown, which could have been caused by the routine change and also perhaps by hunger. An inability to communicate needs, wants, opinions, and feelings. Children with autism have a language impairment, and this is part of their autism. Imagine if you were not able to communicate your needs, your wants, your opinions, or your fears to somebody else. How might that impact your happiness? How might that impact your behaviors? This is what children who have limited verbal abilities or who are non-verbal struggle with every day. Sensory difficulties. Children with autism do have sensory difficulties, many of them. For example, they may not like loud sounds or bright lights or clothes with scratchy seams. I remember that as a child, my daughter was terrified of balloons because of the sound that they would make when they popped. Then comorbid medical conditions such as anxiety, depression, ADHD. Many children with autism do have comorbid medical conditions which need to be under the supervision of a medical practitioner. Then there are many different social and environmental triggers for challenging behaviors. Just an example, for instance, in the environment, if a child is being bullied on the playground by another child, or if he is being treated harshly by a carer or a teacher. Children with autism have language impairments and social anxieties. So would a child who is in this situation actually come to you and be able to share with you what is happening to him? More than likely he would not, and he would retreat into silence or illness or just anxiety and fear of the situations where he is placed in that difficult situation. Then also many children are asked to do tasks or activities that do not match their developmental level, and this causes the child to fail at various tasks, and this in turn leads to challenging behaviors. For example, if you take a child who is at a preschool level in a developmental sense, he maybe could be placed in a second grade class because of his chronological age, and this child would then not be able to cope in this new environment, even though his chronological age is on par with the other children in the classroom. His developmental age lags behind. Or you could have a child in therapy or at home who is asked to sound out words when he has not been taught how to sound out words, when in fact he has only learned how to sight read. And in these situations, it's wrong to say that the child is stubborn, can't do it, but is refusing to or will not do it. We need to truly understand what our children are capable of and not expect children with autism to act their age as this infringes upon their disability. A child could behave negatively in order to get your attention, because any kind of attention is better than no attention. And then also what may be seen as inappropriate behavior is in fact a repetitive or obsessive action that is repeated often by an autistic child and becomes part of his behavior. One of the conditions of autism is that these children do engage in repetitive behaviors, and one of which are called stims. So a child may tap and run obsessively and be left to do this at home, but when he goes into a public place such as a restaurant, his parents might try to stop the repetitive behavior or stim, and this can in turn lead to other challenging behaviors in that situation, such as a meltdown. Reasons for challenging behaviors can be very specific, or they can relate to changes that are occurring in the child's life, including changes in his relationship or his personal situation. For example, a child might cry because he has been refused an ice cream, so that's just an immediate reason. But he might also be upset or sad for many days or weeks because his old carer has left, or because his parents have divorced and one of them has left home. So you can see the difference. It requires you to have a sensitivity towards what would be considered immediate reasons, and then what would be considered changes in your child's life, and both of them would have an impact on his behavior. Just as we would react negatively if our relationships have failed us or our environments do not support us, The same thing can and does often happen to autistic children. The only difference is that we may mask our true feelings and get on with life as neurotypicals, whilst autistic children, due to their disability, are not able to do the same, and so this inability manifests perhaps as a challenging behavior. Not many autistic children have friends. They might be in situations where family members do not spend quality time with them, so they could descend into loneliness and a feeling of isolation. They could feel unloved, unwanted, unappreciated, even neglected. And just because an autistic child cannot express any of these feelings does not mean that he is not actually feeling this way. Then there's also the feeling of being left behind. As life progresses, siblings may leave home, parents may go to work. A child with autism may begin to understand that he is always the one who is left behind, that life goes on elsewhere, outside of his home. And these are realizations that do happen in the minds of our children. Always the failure to communicate this awareness does not mean that the awareness is not there. Children could feel bored or unengaged. Many children with autism are not in school. Others may not have activities, hobbies, and tasks that give them a sense of purpose. If we as neurotypicals did not have a routine, if we did not have a purpose, if we did not have jobs or things to occupy us, if we had tons of free time that were not filled by things like relationships and sport, education and work, we would also come to feel bored and unengaged. And this is then often what happens to autistic children. Children with autism could be in environments that are not supportive, and I'm not saying that this is deliberate on the part of any family or carers, but it sometimes just happens. It happens with children who are unengaged, with children who are silent. It could include, for instance, a home where a child is being given instructions or is simply led to activities, the basic activities such as eating, bathing, sleeping, but no one in the home is playing with the child or speaking to him in any context beyond what is necessary or basic. So the child then becomes isolated in his own home as nobody is interacting with him. To say also then that he prefers it this way, or that this is what he wants, or that he will not interact with others and that he is the reason for the situation, is not a sufficient reason, I feel, to avoid what is crucial for all human beings. And what is crucial is to interact with others on any level and in any way possible. As much as we want to interact with each other, with neurotypicals, we also need to interact with our children with autism at the level that they are capable of. Let's look at some practical examples of challenging behaviors, and I'm going to recall my own experiences with my daughter who is autistic. As a toddler, she cried for hours once while we were in the car on a road trip. She had dropped a toy, it was a dolphin, and this dolphin, she took it everywhere with her and we couldn't find it. We also could not stop to look for it because we were on the freeway. So all that we could do was then to comfort her, to give her something to eat, something to drink, make sure that she was warm, and eventually she slept. And then when we stopped at a petrol station, we then looked for the toy and were able to find it. When she had COVID in 2022, she became very anxious. There's this very real fear of death, dying in hospitals, and so she talked and fussed nonstop. And the sicker she felt, the more she demanded of us that we heal her immediately and completely, as she was afraid of dying. And in this case too, there was nothing really that we could do except to allow the illness to pass, to give her all her medications on time, and to make sure that her routine was good, that she knew she was being treated and she was being cared for. She ate, drank a lot, watched TV and stayed warm, and eventually got better. It was only once she was better then that all the behaviors ended. She's often misunderstood on social media, misunderstood in face-to-face conversations. This is a common problem. She could offend somebody by being too direct, saying things that are misunderstood by others. And this is also a problem because autistic children can be very direct, can say things which others consider to be socially inappropriate, and which then causes a problem in their interactions and relationships. So these types of failed interactions can lead to a lot of upset for her. She feels very stressed, and it can last for days. And on the other side, there are people who are in interactions with her who are fully aware of her autism, but in that situation, faced with what she does or what she has said, they are simply not prepared to be accommodating, and this is a cause of stress for her. And all that we do with this difficulty is that we just continue to talk to her as much as possible, have as many interactions with her, try to get her to speak to as many different people as possible so that she learns. It is only through speaking that she actually learns what to say, what not to say, what people might be offended by, and what is acceptable. One time at school, she was disciplined for showing the finger to one of her classmates, and when we looked into it, it turned out that one of her classmates had in fact shown her the sign and then told her to go and do it, even though she did not understand what it meant. So, she was being taken advantage of in this situation, and did what she was told to do. So it is only that when autistic children learn more and more by being in social situations, that they learn what is right, what is wrong, who is taking advantage of them. The more isolated they are, the more vulnerable they become, and the more they interact, they have many negative experiences, but there is also the chance that they will learn from their experiences and do things differently in the future. Let's look briefly at some of the possible solutions. So let's assume we've discovered the reason for the behavior. What do we then do? In each instance, it is about addressing the reason or the cause, and then trying to manage the behavior calmly and compassionately. Firstly, hitting does not help. It only makes things worse. Shouting, lashing out at your child is like throwing fuel onto a fire. Giving a screaming child what they want only increases the chances that they will scream again in the future in order to get what they want, because screaming, they have learned, is something that works for them. They will need to be taught to ask for what they want by using words or a sign or a visual on a card or an app or an augmentative communication device. Once they learn to communicate, which is a positive behavior, instead of speaking with a behavior such as screaming, which is a negative behavior, then there is a chance that that negative behavior will be replaced by a positive behavior, and because a positive behavior is obviously more effective and serves to get them what they need. Then see a doctor or a dentist or a medical specialist if you suspect that your child is sick, or has some emotional issues, or has food sensitivities or allergies. Health, both physical health and mental health, are priority, and you might find that some conditions may require daily medication to be given to your child. Provide your child with a communication system which will allow him to communicate at least some of his basic needs and wants. Consider the most basic causes of difficult behaviors, such as hunger, thirst, feeling too hot or too cold, or being uncomfortable or being in pain. Remember your own role in challenging behaviors. As neurotypicals, we may criticize the behavior of others, forgetting our own actions and words and how they can impact on the behaviors of others. And the same thing happens when we relate to autistic children. We may fail to take responsibility for our own role in these situations. And here are some examples of what we could be doing. blaming a child for being naughty or difficult when the child may just be hungry because dinner is an hour late, criticizing or judging a child for repetitive behaviors such as stims and trying to stop them when in fact we have our own coping behaviors that we wouldn't want anyone to interfere with, for example, a smoker or a drinker. Saying that a child is stubborn or lazy when the child may simply not be at the developmental level where he can do what he is being asked to do. Having unreasonable expectations of a child that do not correlate to his level of development, and then being disappointed or failing to accept the child's actual strengths and abilities. Failing to recognize that children need to be taught certain activities by breaking them down into small steps and teaching the steps in sequence and then repeating the process until the child has actually learned how to do this task independently. An example would be, for instance, tidying up your own bedroom. So you may know how to tidy up your room, but that doesn't mean that your child can do it intuitively. He would need to be taught the process step by step. Ignoring your child or leaving them to their own devices, basically allowing them to be lonely, and then only going to them when you need their cooperation, for example, to put on their jacket or to get into a car or to go somewhere. Failing to anticipate changes and transitions in your child's life. For example, say you were moving to a new house. You would have to explain in advance to your child that he is going to be living in another home, and this could involve going to the new home and showing it to the child before the actual move. Transitions, any kind of transitions and changes have to be managed with care, as children with autism do not cope well with unpredictability and sudden changes. Look for patterns in your child's behavior over days, weeks, months, as well as in the hour and even the moment. Look for causes, because causes will determine what solutions are necessary. Most parents and other family members do know their children well, and they will make good and educated guesses on the causes of challenging behaviors. My son, for instance, is very good at accurately guessing the reasons behind his sister's behaviors and her motives. This comes from having spent all of his life with her, and as her contemporary, he seems to understand her much better than I do. Create supportive environments for your child. Equip yourself and other family members to interact socially with her, and this could involve games, play, conversations, outdoor activities, spending time together. Interact with your child socially, as this is the only way that he will learn some of the aspects of what is required in having relationships with others. Ensure that there is structure, routine, and purpose in your child's daily life. This could involve a daily and a weekly routine, household chores, hobbies, exercise, sport, spiritual or religious activities such as church or Sunday school, school attendance, or any educational activities done at home with the help of a carer, a parent, or the therapist. The home environment should be set up for success, not for failure. The school environment should suit your child's needs and abilities. Interact with your child in such a way that he knows that he is supported, cared for, loved, and accepted. Dr. James MacDonald says in his book Communicating Partners, we categorically reject the notion that autistic children are not able to have relationships. Even the most isolated and asocial children can learn to take turns, respond meaningfully, and succeed in the common skills for relationships. Please refer to my earlier videos in my channel Unraveling Autism, where I deal with many important issues that have an impact on the management of challenging behaviors. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you would like more useful and practical information on raising a child with autism. Thank you and goodbye.